All right, everyone, welcome to class. Please grab your seats. Today's lecture is going to be quite a ride. We're diving into a story that sits right at the intersection of 90s Hollywood, technology, and, well, the future of money.
It really does. We're going to be looking at a figure who you could argue bridges the gap between movie magic and the, let's say, hardcore financial plumbing of the modern crypto world. We are, of course, talking about Brock Pierce,
And for anyone looking at the syllabus right now and thinking, wait a second, isn't that the kid from the Mighty Ducks?
the young Gordon Bombay, yeah.
You are 100% correct. But today, we're not talking about his hockey skills. We're talking about how he helped build the financial infrastructure for a trillion-dollar industry.
And that's really the core question of today's lesson, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
How does a child star go from Disney movies to, well, creating the most traded cryptocurrency in the entire world? It's a wild arc.
It is.
Because while a lot of people might just know him as this, eccentric character with the interesting hats, his fingerprints are kind of everywhere. We're talking the first ICO, the first big virtual goods market, and the big one, Tether.
Tether, the digital dollar. We're definitely going to spend a lot of time on that.
Yeah.
So here's the plan for today. We're going to trace this evolution from, like, make-believe movie sets to make-believe video game money, and then finally to what has become very real digital currency.
It's all about how we define value. And I want to leave you with a question to just keep in the back of your mind as we go through this.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a story about the democratization of finance? Or is it a story about the lines between reality and simulation just completely blurring?
I love that. Okay, so let's open the history books. The year is 1997. Brock Pierce is 16 years old, and he retires from acting.
Now, this is a classic inflection point for a child star, right? Most of them just fade away.
Or worse. But Pierce pivots, and he pivots hard into the nascent internet.
And we're not just talking about, like, starting a blog.
Yeah.
In 1999, he co-founds a company called the Digital Entertainment Network, DEN.
You have to put yourself in that time period. This is pre-YouTube, pre-Netflix. We're talking about dial-up modems. That sound.
The screeching. But the ambition was huge. They wanted to stream original episodic video content online. They were trying to build Netflix before the pipes were even laid for it.
And here's the number that just always gets me. As a teenager, he raised $88 million in venture capital.
$88 million. He was 18, making $250,000 a year. It was the absolute peak of the dot-com bubble. The idea was right, but the timing was just all wrong.
But the company didn't just fail because it was early, did it? It imploded pretty spectacularly.
It did. There were serious internal controversies. Lawsuits were filed by employees alleging sexual misconduct against the leadership. Pierce was named in some of those civil suits. Now, it's important to state for the record, these were civil suits. They were ultimately dismissed or settled out of court. No criminal convictions. But the scandal, plus the dot-com crash, it was a perfect storm. The company went bankrupt. Pierce resigned.
So he's barely 19, and he's already lived through this massive rise and fall. This brings us to the next chapter, which I think is maybe the most important for understanding where crypto came from.
This is the missing link.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In 2001, he founds a new company, Internet Gaming Entertainment, or IGE.
IGE. Okay, so for the gamers in the class, this should sound familiar. The business model was basically gold farming, wasn't it?
Exactly. They were taking the secondary market for games like World of Warcraft and EverQuest and turning it into a real business. They'd pay people in, say, China to play the game for hours and hours, collecting virtual gold or rare items.
And then IGE would sell that virtual sword or that pile of gold to a player in the U.S. for real money, for, U.S. dollars.
If you are enjoying this video, please watch it until the end. This greatly helps the channel and encourages us to continue our work.
So think about that. You're paying actual cash for an item that only exists as a line of code on a company's server.
Right. And that is the aha moment. Pierce institutionalized the idea that digital entries in a database could have real, tangible economic value. The psychology is identical to cryptocurrency.
And this wasn't some small operation. By 2005, IGE was huge. They were handling, like half of the entire U.S. virtual goods market?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Hundreds of millions in volume. They were the central bank for the metaverse before we even had a word for it.
It's wild. And here's a little historical footnote that you should definitely write down because it's just so bizarre. To help get venture capital for IGE, Pierce hired a guy named Steve Bannon.
Wait. This Steve Bannon, future White House strategist Steve Bannon.
The very same one. He was an investment banker back then. Pierce brought him in to make this whole weird idea of selling video game items sound legitimate to Wall Street investors.
That is an unbelievable connection.
Ugh.
But okay, the big lesson from IGE is clear. He learned about cross-border payments, digital value, and arbitrage. It was the perfect training ground for crypto.
Exactly. So let's fast forward. It's around 2014. Bitcoin exists, but it has this one giant problem holding it back.
Volatility. Just insane price swings, which is great if you're a speculator, but terrible if you're a trader trying to actually use this system.
Right. Imagine you want to lock in your profits. You have to sell your Bitcoin for dollars and get it into a traditional bank account.
And the banks hated crypto. They saw it as this, high-risk, money laundering nightmare, so they just freeze your account. The money was effectively trapped inside the crypto casino.
It's like having a stack of chips, but the cashier's cage is closed. You can't do anything with them.
Precisely. The market needed a stable chip, a token that acted like a dollar but lived on the blockchain. So, in 2014, Pierce, along with Reeve Collins and Craig Sellars, founded a company called RealCoin.
Which they later, very smartly, rebranded to Tether.
And the tech was pretty clever. They didn't build a whole new blockchain. They used something called the Mastercoin protocol, or the Omni layer.
Which let them basically piggyback on top of the Bitcoin blockchain, right?
Yeah, they used Bitcoin's security to issue their own new token. And the promise, the core innovation, was the peg, the stablecoin.
The idea was simple. For every one Tether token, or USDT, that they issued, the company swore it held one real US dollar in a bank, a one-to-one backing.
It was revolutionary. It digitized the dollar. It became the grease in the gears for the entire crypto trading world. You could move dollars between exchanges in seconds, 247, no banks required.
It sounds perfect. But of course, this is where the story gets really, really complicated, which brings us to the exit and all the controversy.
Yeah, this part of the timeline gets a little murky. In 2015, just a year after starting it, Pierce claims he left Tether. He says he transferred 100% of his shares to his partners for zero consideration.
Which is just a fancy way of saying for free.
For free. He just gave it away.
Okay, hold on. Why would anyone do that? You invent the digital dollar, which you have to know is going to be massive, and you just walk away from it for nothing.
That is the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? His public reason was that he wanted to focus on his venture capital firm, Blockchain Capital. But if you look at the risk profile, running a stablecoin is basically running a bank without a license. It's a shadow bank. The regulatory heat was always going to be intense. Maybe he just saw the writing on the wall.
So the ownership then transfers to the executives of Bitfinex, a huge crypto exchange.
Right. Specifically, Giancarlo Divicini and others. So now the exchange and the stablecoin are run by the same small group of people. There's no separation.
And that's where the problems really start. They begin to have massive banking issues.
It did. In 2017, Wells Fargo cut them off. They were basically exiled from the U.S. banking system. So they started using these, let's call them shadowy payment processors. One of them was a firm in Panama called Crypto Capital Corp.
And this is where it gets bad. Crypto Capital Corp wasn't exactly the most reliable partner.
Not at all. About $850 million of Bitfinex and Tether's money, that was with Crypto Capital, just vanished. It was seized by authorities, stolen. It's a mess. But the point is, Bitfinex suddenly had an $850 million hole.
So what did they do?
Well, according to the New York Attorney General, they secretly borrowed the money from Tether's cash reserves to plug the hole.
So they raided the reserves that were supposed to be backing the Tether tokens one-to-one?
Exactly. The investigation found that at one point, Tether was only about 74% backed by cash. That promise was broken.
Wow. That's a classic bank run scenario waiting to happen.
For sure. The end result was an $18.5 million settlement, a ban from operating in New York, and they had to start publishing quarterly reports. But, and this is the crucial part, there was no admission of wrongdoing. They paid the fine, just kept going.
Incredible. Okay, so while all that is brewing, Pierce has moved on to his next big thing. It's 2017. The ICO boom is in full swing.
And Pierce is right in the middle of it, co-founding a company called Block.one. This is the company behind the EO blockchain.
And if we thought the Den fundraising was big, EOS raised over $4 billion in its ICO, the largest ever.
$4 billion. It's just an unfathomable amount of money. But following the pattern, Pierce didn't stick around for long.
Right. He resigned as chief strategy officer in 2018. And the timing there is interesting.
Very interesting. It happened right around the time the comedian John Oliver did that big segment on crypto on his show.
I remember that. He spent a good chunk of it just roasting Pierce, bringing up the old Deden stuff, his unique fashion
It
choices.
was a PR disaster. Shortly after that, he and Block.one mutually agreed to part ways.
So it's a pattern. Launch something huge, raise a ton of capital, and then exit, just as things get really messy or the hard work begins.
He calls himself a doula for creation.
A doula for creation. That's a new one.
That's his term. He helps birth these massive projects, IGE, Tether, EOS, and then he moves on. You can decide if that's a brilliant way to avoid liability or just a lack of follow-through.
Well, his next project was maybe the most ambitious yet. He ran for president of the United States in 2020.
Which brings us to the politician and philosopher phase. He ran as an independent on a platform he called America 2.0.
Like a software update for the country? What was the big idea?
A lot of tech-forward policies. He was big on universal basic income because he believes AI will displace millions of jobs. And of course, he wanted to put voting on the blockchain.
Did that happen?
He actually received the first ever official U.S. presidential vote that was cast using a blockchain. So a little piece of history there. But this was all tied into his move to Puerto Rico.
Right. After Hurricane Maria, he became the face of this Portopia movement, the idea of building a crypto utopia on the island.
The vision was noble on the surface. Rebuild with solar power helped the economy, but it was also very controversial.
Because critics saw it as a bunch of wealthy crypto people moving in to take advantage of the massive tax breaks, right?
Exactly. Act 20 and 22, which basically offer zero capital gains tax. So on one hand, Pierce says he's donating to universities and helping. On the other, critics say it's just a form of tech colonialism, driving up real estate prices for locals.
It's a complicated picture. Which brings us to today. Let's look at the scoreboard. Tether, the company he started and gave away, is a monster.
It's a behemoth. It's the most traded crypto by far, more volume than Bitcoin. And it's incredibly profitable.
The numbers are insane. They made something like $6.2 billion in net income in 2023.
And most of that profit comes from a very simple business. They take the dollars people use to buy Tether and they buy U.S. Treasury bills. And they just keep the interest.
So they're one of the biggest buyers of U.S. government debt in the world.
They hold more U.S. Treasuries than countries like Germany or Australia. Think about that.
Yeah.
An unregulated offshore company started by a former child actor is a larger creditor to the U.S. government than Germany.
That's unsettling, and with that size comes the too big to fail risk. If Tether ever broke its peg, the contagion would be catastrophic for the entire crypto market.
It's the liquidity rail for the whole system. And it's still under constant scrutiny for its role in illicit finance and money laundering. It provides efficiency, but it's also a huge regulatory blind spot.
So when you look back at Pierce's career, his legacy, he's just this fascinating connecting figure.
He is. He sees the future before other people do. Virtual goods, stablecoins, ICOs. He's raised over $5 billion across his ventures. But every single one comes with a cloud of controversy.
So to sum up today's class, we've gone from a kid on a hockey rink to a digital currency architect. We've seen how virtual swords paved the way for virtual dollars.
And I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. We now live in a world where the financial backbone of the entire crypto economy is a digital token invented by a former child actor and run by a handful of offshore operators. So is that the ultimate democratization of finance? Or is it the ultimate house of cards?
That is the question. No exam, but definitely something to think about.
If viewers enjoyed the video, they can subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell to be notified about new videos, click the like button, and share the video with their colleagues, as this helps us maintain the channel. Thank you.
Well said. Okay, before our next session, I want you all to look up the term universal tokenization. That's where Pierce thinks this is all heading next. Class dismissed.